Harper sat in stunned silence as multi-million-dollar checks went to relatives who hadn't visited in a decade. Having sacrificed her 20s to care for her dying grandmother, she received only a rusty brass key. That single piece of brass, however, held a secret powerful enough to destroy them all. The rain outside the sprawling Montgomery estate in Westchester mirrored the heavy, suffocating atmosphere inside the mahogany-lined library. The funeral of Evelyn Montgomery had been an extravagant affair, less a celebration of a matriarch's 92 years of life, and more a networking event for the coastal elite. Now the sprawling property was deathly quiet, save for the rhythmic tapping of Gregory's Oxfords against the hardwood floor. Harper sat in the corner of the room, her black dress slightly rumpled, her eyes red and swollen. She was exhausted down to the marrow of her bones. For the past 5 years, while the rest of the family summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen, Harper had been here. She had changed Evelyn's bedpans, managed her complex array of medications, and held her frail, trembling hand through the darkest hours of the night when the dementia terrors took hold. Harper had put her freelance graphic design career on hold, drained her meager savings, and essentially paused her youth. She hadn't done it for the money. She had done it because she loved the fierce, sharp-tongued woman who had essentially raised her after her own parents passed away. Across the room, her Uncle Gregory checked his Rolex for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Gregory was a real estate developer whose tan was a little too orange and whose smile never quite reached his eyes. Rumors had been swirling that his firm was over-leveraged, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Next to him lounged Fiona, Gregory's 24-year-old daughter. Fiona was currently checking her reflection in the dark screen of her phone, seemingly more concerned about the humidity ruining her blowout than the fact that she had just buried her grandmother. "Can we get this over with?" Gregory snapped, pouring himself a generous measure of Evelyn's prized single malt scotch. "Some of us have flights to catch, Donovan. I have a board meeting in London tomorrow." Donovan Wallace, the executor of the Montgomery estate and Evelyn's longtime attorney, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He was a stoic man in his late 60s, possessing a face like carved granite. He offered no sympathetic smiles. He merely unclasped his leather briefcase and withdrew a thick sheaf of papers bound by a navy ribbon. "Patience, Gregory," Donovan said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. Evelyn was very specific about how this reading was to be conducted. Everyone must be present, and everyone must hear the terms exactly as she dictated them 3 months before her passing. Harper's heart gave a slight, hopeful flutter. 3 months ago, Evelyn had experienced a rare period of total lucidity. They had spent a beautiful afternoon on the veranda, drinking iced tea, and Evelyn had stroked Harper's hair, whispering, "I see everything, my sweet girl. I see who is here, and I see who is waiting like vultures in the trees. I will make sure you never have to struggle again." Donovan cleared his throat and began to read. The legalese was dense, but the distribution of the vast Montgomery empire quickly became crystal clear. "To my son, Gregory Montgomery, I leave the primary estate in Westchester, the commercial real estate portfolio in Manhattan, and the contents of the offshore accounts held in the Cayman Islands, liquidating to approximately $34 million. Gregory exhaled a loud, breathy sigh of relief, sinking into a leather wingback chair. The financial guillotine hovering over his business had just been lifted. He shot a smug, victorious look toward the fireplace. "To my granddaughter, Fiona Montgomery," Donovan continued, turning the page. I leave the trust fund established in 1998, the entirety of my vintage jewelry collection, and the summer property in Martha's Vineyard. Fiona squealed softly, clapping her hands together. Oh my God, the Cartier Panther necklace is finally mine. I knew it. She didn't even pretend to muster a tear. Harper swallowed hard. She didn't want millions. She just wanted enough to pay off the crushing credit card debt she had accumulated, buying Evelyn's out-of-pocket holistic treatments and specialized mobility equipment. A modest house, a little cushion to restart her life. That was all she hoped for. Donovan paused. The silence in the library stretched, pulling taut like a bowstring. He looked up from the papers, his eyes landing squarely on Harper. For a brief second, Harper thought she saw a flicker of profound pity cross the old lawyer's face. "And to my granddaughter, Harper Montgomery," Donovan read, his voice dropping a fraction of a decibel, "who gave me her youth, her time, and her boundless patience. To my devoted Harper, I leave the truth and the means to unlock it." Harper blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Donovan set the papers down. He reached into his inner suit pocket and withdrew a small, heavy manila envelope. He walked across the Persian rug and extended it to Harper. Her hands shook as she took it. The envelope was sealed with red wax, stamped with Evelyn's personal monogram. "That is all," Donovan said quietly. "Wait," Harper said, her voice cracking. "That's it? The truth? What does that even mean? Is there a secondary trust? A fund for her medical debts?" Gregory let out a sharp, barking laugh. He stood up, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. It means exactly what it says, sweetheart. You get whatever is in that envelope. Honestly, Harper, I don't know why you look so shocked. Mother always said you lacked ambition. She knew giving you a fortune would just ruin your work ethic. Besides, you lived here rent-free for 5 years. Consider that your inheritance. "I was changing her diapers, Gregory," Harper snapped, standing up, the envelope clutched to her chest. "I bathed her. I fed her. You visited exactly 3 times in 5 years, and only when you needed a signature for your loans." "Don't be dramatic," Fiona chimed in, filing a nail. "You chose to play Florence Nightingale. Nobody forced you. It's not our fault Grandma didn't think you could handle real capital." Harper looked to Donovan, silently pleading with the lawyer to tell her this was a joke, a test, a misunderstanding. But Donovan merely packed up his briefcase, his face impassive. "The estate is settled, Harper. The funds have already been transferred. You have until Friday to vacate the premises so the property can be staged for the market." Gregory was selling the estate. The home Evelyn had cherished for 6 decades. The gardens she had meticulously designed, all to be liquidated to save his failing company. Tears of hot, stinging humiliation spilled over Harper's eyelashes. It wasn't just the money. It was the profound, soul-crushing betrayal. The woman she had loved, the woman she had sacrificed everything for, had left her with absolutely nothing while rewarding the family's worst parasites. Without another word, Harper turned and fled the library. She ran out into the pouring rain, climbing into her beat-up, rusted Honda Civic. She locked the doors, rested her forehead against the steering wheel, and sobbed until her lungs ached. When the tears finally subsided, leaving her hollow and numb, she looked at the envelope on the passenger seat. She broke the wax seal and tipped the contents into her palm. A heavy, tarnished brass key fell into her hand. It was old. Older than the house, perhaps. It looked like something that belonged in a Dickens novel, with a complex, jagged teeth pattern and a wide, circular bow. She turned it over. Scratched into the tarnished metal, barely legible, were 3 letters: WBT. Harper wiped her eyes. She stared at the letters, a spark of defiant anger slowly replacing her grief. I leave the truth and the means to unlock it. Evelyn was not a cruel woman. She was eccentric, yes, manipulative sometimes, but she was never needlessly cruel. If she left Harper a key, it wasn't a punishment. It was a map. Harper didn't sleep that night. She sat at the cramped kitchen table of her small, overpriced Brooklyn apartment, a place she was 3 months behind on rent for, staring at her laptop screen in the dark. WBT. She had searched the acronym against every known bank, storage facility, and safe deposit company in the tri-state area. For hours, she found nothing but defunct businesses and irrelevant acronyms. It was around 3:00 a.m., fueled by her 4th cup of cheap black coffee, that she finally expanded her search to historical corporate registries. There it was. Wellington Bank and Trust. It was a small, ultra-exclusive private bank founded in the 1920s. It catered strictly to old money families and had notoriously shunned digital records, operating entirely on paper ledgers and handshake discretion. The bank had officially closed its doors in 2008, following the financial crisis, absorbed by a massive national conglomerate. However, a deep dive into an obscure finance forum revealed a loophole. Because Wellington promised eternal confidentiality, a handful of their original legacy safety deposit vaults were maintained in a subterranean facility in Lower Manhattan, managed by a skeleton crew of archivists for the original account holders. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, Harper was standing outside a nondescript, brutalist concrete building on Wall Street. There was no grand sign, just a small brass plaque that read, Wellington Archival Services. She pushed through the heavy glass doors and found herself in a lobby that smelled of ozone and lemon polish. Behind a thick pane of bulletproof glass sat an elderly man in a sharp, albeit outdated, 3-piece suit. His name tag read Abernathy. "Can I help you, miss?" Abernathy asked, not looking up from a leather-bound ledger. "This facility is for legacy clients only. We do not offer retail banking." Harper slid the heavy brass key under the security slot. "I believe I am a legacy client, or at least my grandmother was." Abernathy glanced at the key. The moment his eyes registered the shape of the bow, his posture changed. He sat up, bone straight, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his wrinkled face. He picked up the key with reverent caution, inspecting the micro-grooves. "Good heavens," he murmured. "A Series 7. We haven't had one of these presented in, well, decades. Name of the account holder?" "Evelyn Montgomery." Abernathy typed the name into an ancient, chunky computer terminal. A green cursor blinked aggressively. He nodded slowly. "Yes. Box 8114. Leased in 1972 in perpetuity. You have her death certificate?" Harper slid the folded document through the slot. Abernathy inspected it, stamped it, and pressed a button. A heavy steel door to her right clicked open. "Take the elevator to sub-level 3, Abernathy instructed. "A custodian will meet you there. Be advised, miss, whatever is in that box has not seen the light of day in over 50 years. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a tomb. The doors opened to a massive, climate-controlled vault lined floor to ceiling, with thousands of long, rectangular steel boxes. A silent custodian in a grey uniform led her down aisle after aisle, finally stopping before a wall of larger, oversized boxes at the very back of the facility. He inserted his master key. Harper inserted hers, and with a heavy clunk, box 814 released. The custodian pulled the 2-foot-long metal drawer out, placed it on a private viewing table, and left Harper alone in the silent, humming room. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. She had expected money. Perhaps gold bars or bearer bonds, or something Evelyn had squirreled away to hide from Gregory. Instead, the box was filled with paper, stacks of old, yellowed ledgers. Manila folders stuffed with bank transfers, property deeds, and faded photographs. On top of the pile sat a pristine white envelope with Harper's name written in Evelyn's sharp, cursive hand. Harper tore the envelope open. "My dearest Harper, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the theater of my will has played out exactly as I intended. I imagine Gregory is currently celebrating, and Fiona is likely flaunting jewelry she does not understand the blood price of. I know you must hate me right now. I know you felt abandoned in that library. I needed them to believe they had won. I needed them to believe you were utterly powerless. Because if Gregory knew what you now hold in your hands, he would not hesitate to kill you." Harper's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the edge of the metal table, her eyes flying across the page. "The Montgomery fortune is a lie, Harper. The money Gregory thinks he inherited, the real estate, the Cayman accounts, it is entirely fraudulent. In the late 1980s, your Uncle Gregory and your grandfather orchestrated a massive embezzlement scheme, stealing millions from their own corporate clients, including pension funds of blue-collar workers. I only discovered this horrifying truth 5 years ago, shortly before my health began to fail. I spent the last 5 years quietly compiling the evidence. The ledgers in this box contain every offshore routing number, every forged signature, and every shell company Gregory used to build our family's empire. I did not go to the authorities because I knew Gregory's lawyers would bury the case and drag me through the mud while I was dying. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to inherit the accounts, because the moment the estate transferred into his name, the trap was set. Harper dug into the box, moving the ledgers aside. Beneath them was a heavy, black velvet pouch. I have forwarded copies of these ledgers to the SEC and the FBI through Donovan. They are scheduled to arrive on Gregory's desk on Monday morning. By Tuesday, his assets will be frozen. By Wednesday, he will likely be indicted. The empire is going to burn, Harper, and I needed you far away from the blast radius. By giving you nothing, I ensured the courts could not touch you." Harper opened the black velvet pouch. She tipped it over the metal table. A cascade of glittering, flawless, uncut diamonds spilled out under the harsh fluorescent lights. They were the size of marbles, catching the light and throwing rainbows across the sterile walls of the vault. "The stones in this pouch are clean," the letter concluded. "I bought them anonymously in the 1970s, long before the fraud began. They are untraceable, completely separate from the estate, and worth approximately $12 million. This is your true inheritance, my sweet girl. You gave me peace in my final years. Now, I give you the power to start anew, and the front row seat to watch the vultures finally get exactly what they deserve. With all my love, Grandma Evelyn." Harper stared at the fortune glittering on the metal table, the hum of the subterranean vault, the only sound in the world. A slow, dangerous smile crept across her face. The tears of humiliation she had cried yesterday felt like they belonged to a different person entirely. Evelyn hadn't abandoned her. She had made her the architect of their destruction, and as Harper scooped the diamonds back into the pouch, she knew her first stop wouldn't be a jewelry appraiser. It would be a front-row seat at Gregory's office on Monday morning. The weekend passed in a surreal, adrenaline-fueled blur for Harper. She did not return to the sprawling Westchester estate. Instead, she booked a modest, cash-only room at a Ramada Inn off Interstate 95, clutching the heavy velvet pouch against her chest while she slept. On Saturday morning, she secured a private, high-security safety deposit box at a branch of Chase Manhattan, locking away all but 2 of the uncut diamonds. Those 2 stones she took to a discreet, highly recommended gemologist in the Diamond District named Henrik Vanderberg, an old Dutch expatriate known for his absolute silence. Henrik had adjusted his jeweler's loop, holding the rough stones up to a specialized halogen lamp. He had gasped, a soft, breathless sound. "These are exceptional, Miss Montgomery," he had whispered in his thick accent. "Flawless D-color. Unheated. Mined decades ago before the modern laser-cutting techniques. Even in the rough, these 2 alone will fetch a minimum of $900,000 on the private market." Harper had nodded, her pulse thudding in her ears. She instructed Henrik to broker the sale quietly, paying his exorbitant commission without a flinch. By Monday morning, Harper was standing across the street from the towering glass and steel skyscraper on Madison Avenue that housed Montgomery Enterprises. The rain from the funeral had vanished, replaced by a crisp, unforgiving autumn sunlight that reflected off the building's facade. She wore a simple trench coat, a pair of oversized sunglasses, and held a cardboard cup of black coffee, watching the polished revolving doors. At exactly 9:15 a.m., a fleet of black, unmarked SUVs aggressively pulled up to the curb, illegally parking in the bus lane. Harper's breath hitched. Evelyn's timing, as always, was impeccably ruthless. A dozen men and women in dark windbreakers spilled out of the vehicles. The bold yellow letters on the backs of their jackets read, FBI. Mixed among them were individuals in sharp suits clutching heavy briefcases, the hounds from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They stormed through the revolving doors, moving with a practiced, terrifying military precision. Up on the 42nd floor, Gregory Montgomery was in the middle of a celebratory champagne toast with his board of directors. Fiona was sitting in the corner of his expansive corner office, admiring the Cartier Panther necklace draped around her neck, snapping photos for her social media followers. According to the details Harper would later read in the New York Post, the raid was spectacularly brutal. Special Agent Liam Gallagher of the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division did not knock. He breached the glass doors of the boardroom with his badge held high, interrupting Gregory mid-sentence. "Gregory Montgomery, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and violations of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act," Agent Gallagher boomed, his voice echoing over the terrified gasps of the board members. Gregory dropped his champagne flute. The crystal shattered against the imported Italian marble floor. "This is an outrage," he sputtered, his signature orange tan rapidly draining to a sickly, ashen gray. "Do you know who I am? I demand to call my attorney. Donovan Wallace is on retainer." "Mr. Wallace is the one who facilitated the delivery of the evidence to our field office, sir," an SEC investigator named Naomi Preston replied coldly, tossing a thick, bound dossier onto the mahogany conference table. It was a perfect replica of the ledgers Evelyn had locked in the Wellington vault. "Your accounts in the Cayman Islands were frozen at 8:10 a.m. this morning. You are entirely out of business." Fiona shrieked as a female agent gently but firmly confiscated her phone, informing her that all assets purchased with estate funds were now considered evidence. The Cartier necklace was unclasped from her neck, placed into a plastic evidence bag, and sealed. Down on the street, Harper watched as Gregory was marched out of the building in handcuffs, his expensive tailored suit looking suddenly pathetic and oversized on his slumping frame. Fiona followed closely behind, sobbing hysterically, her mascara running down her face in thick, dark streaks, desperately trying to hide her face from the aggressive flashes of the local paparazzi who had already caught wind of the spectacle. Harper took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. The bitterness tasted like pure victory. She tossed the cup into a nearby trash can, turned on her heel, and walked away. She didn't look back. The empire was burning, exactly as her grandmother had promised. The fallout from the Montgomery Enterprises raid dominated the 24-hour news cycle for weeks. The Wall Street Journal ran a massive front-page exposé detailing the decades-long embezzlement scheme. Gregory was denied bail, deemed flight risk due to his extensive network of offshore contacts, and remanded to the Metropolitan Correctional Center. His high-priced defense team abandoned him the moment his retainer checks bounced. Fiona, entirely stripped of her trust fund, her designer wardrobe, and her sprawling summer properties, was forced to move into a cramped studio apartment in Queens with a former college roommate who barely tolerated her. The socialite who had sneered at Harper's lack of ambition was now working as a hostess at a mid-tier Italian restaurant, completely cut off from the elite circles that had instantly blacklisted the Montgomery name. Harper, meanwhile, remained invisible to the chaos. The authorities combed through the estate, seizing every painting, every bank account, and every square inch of real estate, but they found absolutely no trace of Harper. Because she had officially inherited nothing, her name was never dragged into the indictments or the subsequent civil lawsuits filed by the defrauded pension funds. 6 months later, the cold New York winter had thawed into a brilliant, blooming spring. Harper sat on the expansive wooden deck of a beautiful mid-century modern home nestled in the hills of the Pacific Northwest, overlooking the deep blue waters of Puget Sound. The air smelled of pine needles and salt water, a world away from the suffocating mahogany library in Westchester. She had legally changed her last name to her mother's maiden name, severing the final tie to the Montgomery legacy. With the staggering millions secured from Henrik Vanderberg's discreet liquidation of the diamonds, Harper had bought the property outright. She had finally launched her own graphic design agency, outfitting a state-of-the-art studio on the lower level of the house. She wasn't doing it for the money anymore. She was doing it because she loved the work. For the first time in 5 years, she felt profound, unshakable peace. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Harper walked down to the small private garden she had cultivated in the backyard. She had planted an entire bed of rare blue hydrangeas, Evelyn's absolute favorite flower. She knelt in the damp soil, carefully pruning the vibrant blooms. She wore a simple pair of denim overalls and a worn-out t-shirt, her hands caked in dirt. Around her neck, glinting in the pale sunlight, hung a simple silver chain. Attached to the chain was the rusty, heavy brass Series 7 key from the Wellington Bank. She hadn't kept it for sentimental value. She kept it as a daily reminder. A reminder of the terrifying power of patience, the invisible weight of loyalty, and the explosive consequences of underestimating the quiet girl in the corner. Evelyn had known exactly what she was doing. She had played the ultimate game of chess from beyond the grave, sacrificing her own legacy to ensure justice was served, while secretly crowning the only pawn who had actually cared for her. Harper touched the cool brass of the key, closed her eyes, and smiled into the coastal breeze. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, the words carrying away on the wind. "I'm safe now. We won." Before going inside, she checked her tablet. The latest news alert popped up on the screen. Gregory had officially taken a plea deal, accepting a 20-year sentence in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. The millions he had stolen were slowly being returned to the blue-collar workers he had defrauded. It was the final, definitive nail in the coffin of his arrogance. Harper locked the tablet screen. She walked back into her sunlit, peaceful home, poured herself a glass of crisp white wine, and toasted to the brilliant, vindictive genius of Evelyn Montgomery. The hollow inheritance had been a fortress in disguise. What a jaw-dropping revenge from beyond the grave. Evelyn proved that true loyalty is rewarded, while unchecked greed ultimately destroys itself. Do you think Grandma Evelyn went too far by letting Gregory believe he won? Or was it the perfect trap? Let us know your thoughts on this family drama in the comments. If you enjoyed this incredible story, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos.